Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the new album from The Roots. And Then You Shoot Your Cousin. Yeah, I know this review is more than a bit late. There's actually a definite reason for that. For a band like The Roots, you want to make sure that you're getting these sorts of reviews right the first time. And at this point, after going through The Roots' massively and critically acclaimed discography, which I did before starting this review, I'm a little bit lost at where to even start. Beginning in the early 90s, the band started out as an alternative hip-hop act, fronted by one of the most lyrically dexterous MCs to ever pick up the mic, and a fusion of jazz and conscious hip-hop to create some of the most impressively insightful rap that I've ever heard. And if it wasn't for the fact that they've easily made at least 4 classic albums, but you know what? These albums they made hold up astoundingly well. There might have been brief moments of experimentation that might have flitted away with the times, but I could give you a record like Things Falling Apart right now and it'd still be accessible and relevant and definitely still worth your time. Now, if you're looking for albums from The Roots that would be my favorites, man, that's tough. You know what? It'd probably come down to a split between the groove-rich, experimental, and melody-rich phrenology and the haunted, aching sadness of Undone. The latter being the most recent Roots album released before this one. That album is one that I've long expected that The Roots would eventually get up and make. Now, with the stability of being Jimmy Fallon's backing band, they've got the freedom to take more risks and get weirder. Because Undone is a concept album, exploring the life in reverse of a man trying to make it out of the trap. And while I wish the rapping had painted a little bit more of a starker, detailed picture, that was never their intent on that album. What Black Thought and the rest of the band deliver instead is a hazy enough portrait that many could see themselves resembling. And combined with the soulful undercurrents, the personal yet very reflective lyrics, and the incredible melody lines, it easily makes that album one of the best of the decade thus far, at least for me. So you know what? When I heard that The Roots were making yet another concept album with And Then You Shoot Your Cousin this year, I was really psyched for it. And while this review is late, I was determined that I was going to cover this album at some point regardless. So you know what? How was it? Well, this is a fascinating case because I didn't expect an album like this from The Roots. Because as a concept album, this is about the furthest from pure hip-hop that The Roots have ever gone. Not only that, it's the sort of record that, thanks to its tone and its presentation, I guarantee it'll alienate a lot of critics, especially those expecting this album to have a very specific sound from The Roots when approaching this specific subject matter. But you know what? I dig it. Yeah, I think this album is pretty damn great, even if I do think a few tweaks to it could have made it a tad more effective in conveying its intended tone and message. So yeah, it's definitely getting a recommendation. So you know what? Let's start with the first important fact of this album. It's a satire of modern hip-hop. Hell, the title makes that obvious. The excerpt from the KRS-One lyric pointing out that what can happen when consequences of shallow living are ignored and treated carelessly. And thus, this album takes the tropes of modern gangsta, trap, and luxury rap and skewers them lyrically with the cutting wordplay that you'd expect from Black Thought. And unlike Undone's specific character that the album follows, this is a much more broader portrait of the many different rappers and situations that you can draw many parallels to rappers in modern day. Never rings as a script from the black youth of America who look up to the rappers that might have been portrayed on When the People Cheer. A song viciously eviscerating the stripper-obsessed hedonism embodied by artists like, say, 2 Chainz or Lil Wayne. Although those rappers both wish they could speak with this level of wordplay. Black Rock drives into grimy hood rap with a striking level of detail, and Understand tackles the faux religious trappings of some hip-hop and rips the fragile justification of it all to absolute pieces. The juxtaposition between that, the noisy explosion of disarray, and the mournful soul of the coming, a despondent look at how street violence is becoming routine in some cities, that's some of the best on this record, and it can become genuinely haunting. And then the album's themes are hammered forward again with the Dark Trinity, attacking the obsessions with cash, drugs, and violence, and exposing the hollow decadence and hypocrisy of all three. And then in a move that calls to mind starkly Pharoah Monch's most recent album PTSD, which has a lot of similar themes, The Roots brings the final 2 tracks to the very edge of death and despair with the breaking timber and the unraveling before showing a solitary beam of hope in the soulful tomorrow. And unlike PTSD, the ambiguous ending thematically is played much more subtly, with only a shift to minor chords on the keys that actually comes across, in my opinion, a fair bit better. And you know what? The wordplay is goddamn stellar. Black Thought is a consistently underrated spitter outside of hip-hop circles of impressively nuanced and insightful rhymes that he puts a lot of himself into, and he definitely holds his own here. Able to speak in the arch concept exposing hypocrisy and the shallowness of modern mainstream hip-hop, but at the same time he's able to so effectively embody those characters in order to effectively satirize them. And yet despite all this, Black Thought is featured less in this album than ever before, with a great focus on sung vocals in a more operatic fashion, which for the most part, you know what, they're not bad. I'll admit not being the biggest fan of the girlish vocals on Never, but they fit the tone of the lyrics pretty effectively, and I definitely like Raheem DeVaughn's more soulful delivery. On the other hand, there are moments such as the sampled clip The Devil that could have had a little bit more impact if handled a little more subtly, because make no mistake, this album does not consistently have the grime and grit that used to characterize some of the Roots' other more dark albums, especially in the instrumentation and in the production. Most of the tones are very clear, mournfully driven by dreary keyboards, mournful strings, and echoing percussion, with the big exceptions being the grimy guitar on Black Rock and the organ on Understand, both of which I really did like. And by the way, even though Black Rock was a little bit, that sample was a little too blatant. That, combined with some of the more symphonic vocals and the bleaker tones, give this album a very symphonic and almost gothic feel, which by its presentation isn't always that subtle. And while I don't mind this direction at all, I've got a huge passion for symphonic and gothic music, I don't quite think it was handled as well as it could have been. For starters, there wasn't a lot of consistency in the vocal production. At points, it was very clear as day. You could hear every single verse that they were spitting very, very clearly, but at other points, they felt like the mic pickup was distinctly of lower quality. And while I really like the fade-in piano melody of The Coming, Mercedes Martinez's vocals, they felt a little bit too close to the front of the mix, or the production just a shade too rough. It could have been better there. Or take the Devil interlude. I love the idea of the sample, but the sample, they didn't do anything with it. They could have gone with a fuller choir or gotten rid of the gospel counter melodies, because with them it gets a little too close to sounding a bit silly, at least in the way when it's placed on the record in this way. It's a delicate line to toe. But you know what? The issue here is a little bigger, because this is definitely an album that feels less of a solid piece as a whole and more of a selection of instrumental and musical vignettes. And while the transitions between these vignettes are excellent, the lyrical and tonal consistency is a little bit more scattershot. And when you choose to go for symphonic elements and you necessarily go broader instrumentally on pieces of this album, it loses even more flow in between the pieces, especially when the production quality on the samples and the instrumentation is as varied as it is, and especially when the lyrics have so much more nuance. They don't exactly fit the broader instrumentation. And while I get the choice for this instrumental tone, if they're trying to make a point of how that sort of creepier, downbeat, dark music feels really off-kilter when placed against gangster rap lyrics, they make that comparison work, but at the same time, I can't help but feel that there were ways to make this satire a little bit more direct. And you know what? I can't believe I'm going to say this, and longtime fans will know how absolutely insane this is coming out of my mouth, but you know what? If the Roots had grabbed a couple trap beats from an artist like ASAP Ferb and used them for songs like When the People Cheer and The Dark Trinity, they might have felt a little bit more cohesive with this album as a whole, and the satire might have felt a little bit more direct, might have had a little bit more punch for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the songs as they are, but for the overall cohesion of the album, they might have just clicked a little bit better. But look, this album, it's goddamn great. A satirical look at gangster rap that might not have the visceral, emotional gut punch of Pharoah Monch's PTSD, but does have the wordplay and experimentation and, in my opinion, a stronger ending. I won't say it's my favorite Roots album. Undone and Phrenology are stone cold classics in my book, but And Then You Shoot Your Cousin is one of the Roots' most experimental and engaging albums to date, at least for me. And for that, it's an 8 out of 10 and a definite recommendation. If you like hip-hop that's pushed to the limit with a bit of an odder twist that still managed to deliver on wordplay and content. It might have taken me a while to get to this album, but the Roots have definitely made it worth the wait. So go on, check it out if you haven't already. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.